Hello everybody and welcome to part 7 of my Fire Emblem 6 hard mode chapter guide. Today we're going to be doing chapter 7, which as I've been alluding to in the previous parts, I think is one of, if not just the most difficult chapter in this game. There's a lot going on in this chapter, and especially if you want to turn to recruit some green units that are going to show up, which is pretty much necessary if you don't want them to die. This chapter can be really challenging. So before I get into the chapter, I just want to mention a few different things because this video is going to look a little bit different than the previous ones. I've been experimenting with how I want to sort of edit these and stuff. The previous ones, the footage is all taken from the Fire Emblem 6 guide that I have, or not guide, but Iron Man that I have on my channel. So if you want to see the complete gameplay of that, feel free to check that out. It's all in a playlist. But this is going to be taken from me playing the game as we go. So the only thing this is going to change is the commentary is going to be a bit more live, and it's going to look a little bit different, and our characters are going to be slightly different. I tried to train around the same characters, like our Lance is quite good, and our Alan is quite good. I trained Lou and stuff like that, so shouldn't be too different. But yeah, just in case you were wondering, hopefully this will offer a little bit better, a little bit of a better vehicle to explain the chapters and stuff. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's get into the actual chapter itself. So why is this chapter so difficult? Why do I say it's so difficult? Well, one of the biggest reasons is that even though we're not seeing too many units right now, more units are going to spawn when we start. Fire Emblem 6 likes to do this. There's a chapter much later where there are just, it doesn't seem like that many, and then there's a bunch when you actually start the chapter. One of the other reasons that it's so difficult is because of these guys right here. As you can see, for this stage of the game, these wyverns are really strong. Now this one doesn't move, but there's going to be another one that's going to appear over here, and this one does. And it's really hard to find units that can actually deal a lot of damage. This is why in the previous chapter I mentioned that archers can actually be really useful here, because taking down these wyverns is quite challenging, even for your strongest units. They're pretty fast, they have a high amount of defense, 36 health, a lot of health. It's because you have 34, that's a lot of health. The other thing is these guys, these physics staff users, and we're going to be talking about them a little bit later on. But this means that, especially when it comes to the wyverns, but when it comes to any units, damaging them will not sort of guarantee you a kill or actually chip enemies down as you go, because they'll just get healed. With wyverns, this is really important because it means you basically have to kill the wyvern in one shot, which is not easy, as we'll see. Other than that, there's just a lot of units, a lot of generic units. Some houses over here that we're going to want to be getting. But yeah, a new thing that I'm going to start with this is we're just going to talk a little bit about the preps. So at this stage in the game, I've talked about how good Alan and Lance is. I like Luke quite a bit, Rucker, so we're going to be bringing them. We don't need Merlinus or Boars. And like I said, I really like the archers. It's also not super necessary to have a million healers here, because a lot of times they're going to be running around not doing much. So I'm just going to bring 2, Saul and Clarine. Chad is kind of a flex spot, I think, with this chapter. There is a chest, 2 chests up here and a door that you're going to want Chad for. Now, it's not super necessary. it is sort, because he's not actually providing you with anything, right? He's not going to see any combat. So you may want to switch out Chad with, like, another archer if you're not bringing them, or another healer. Lot can also be extremely useful in this chapter. In fact, I might actually bring Lot instead of Dorothy, because he can be really useful with his decent bulk. But yeah, I'm going to bring Chad, but he is sort of a flex spot. If you start struggling with this chapter, you may want to ditch Chad. Alright, so I've done a little bit of battle preps here, but I just want to talk about the formation, because one of the really important things about this chapter is if you do want to be getting the green units that appear, specifically Trek, because Zealot can actually survive for a while, but Zealot and Trek are going to appear here and here. The best way to do it, especially as I said when it comes to Trek, is he'll die. He actually has a very good chance of just dying in the turn he appears, but you can do a turn 2 recruit. And so, in order to do that, we're just going to talk a little bit about this formation. What we're going to need to do is have Marcus here, because Marcus is going to kill this guy, and we can actually start the chapter, and I'll explain as we go. Because the turn 2 recruit of them is really important to making this chapter really consistent. So a little bit to do with sort of what you want on your units. Make sure that all these guys have vulneraries. They're going to be really important on this chapter, including Marcus. Marcus also needs the Armor Slayer. So what we're going to want to do is have Marcus go up here and kill this knight. You can also, I believe... Okay, you can't do it with the Sever Lance, but the Armor Slayer will work. So this is step 1. There are 3 units that we're going to need to kill in order to get the turn 2 recruit of Zealot and Trek. This is number 1. Now, what we need... Zealot's going to appear here, right? So we need Roy to be here so that he can have his 5 move to go recruit him. But obviously Roy can't get there. So this is why Sue is nice. You can also use Stanny for this. Obviously Lance and Alan can also do it on their own. But anything works. So you're going to want to put somebody over here. And then you can rescue drop with either Lance or Alan or anybody to there. And this sets up the turn 2 recruit. So this is the formation that you're going to want for the turn 2 recruit. Now, as far as the other side is concerned, basically everyone who isn't Lance, Alan, Marcus, and Roy can go on that side. Lance and Alan at this point hopefully are really good. I mentioned supports earlier. I have built mine. It's not necessary, but it helps with the consistency here, as I've talked about. Also for the unit that we're going to have to kill in a second here. You'll also have Marcus and the aforementioned Zealot that we're going to be recruiting, who's also pretty strong and can hold his own. So they're usually enough to take this side on their own. If you can do the turn 2 recruit. So everybody else, I think, going this way is for the best. And Lou actually can handle this knight quite well. Okay, so enemy phase here is really important. Now I'm going to mention something with this mercenary. And I mentioned the physic users in the intro and why they're important. Now they're important for a variety of reasons. But they're really important for what just happened. Because you can trade Marcus off of the Armor Slayer to a Silver Lance. Because we're going to need to kill that mercenary. So you may think the Silver Lance will deal more damage, so that'll be more useful. And that is true in theory. But if you deal too much damage to the mercenary, the Physic Clerics will come out and heal. But I turned the animation for Sue. But that will prompt them to come out and heal the mercenary. I don't know exactly the sort of like damage threshold that makes them come out. I assume it's something like 50%. But the Armor Slayer will not deal enough to force that to happen. Now, of course, you can trade him onto like an Iron Lance or something if you don't want to use Silver Lance hits. But that's really important to do. Now, as I mentioned, Zealot and Trek are going to be showing up. So, in order to do the turn 2 recruit, like I said, we have to kill 3 units, though. The knight we killed, we have to kill this mercenary, and then we have to kill this cavalier, because they'll always wind up where they currently are. And then that'll allow Roy to do that. So, let's see what our options are here. And this is really important to do, because I've had times where I'm not able to do this, I get some bad misses, something along those lines. And everything can fall apart very quickly. This is actually also, as I mentioned before, where Marcus getting the speed level up is really important. Although actually it looks like he needs 2. I thought this guy had 8 speed, but it looks like he has 1 more than I thought. So how can we do this? Looks like Alan potentially with support can do it. Okay, Lance doubles this guy. That's really good. Unfortunately, we don't get our Alan support. Wondering if there's a safer way to do this. Alright, I think we're just going to have to take the 76%. Unfortunately, and this is what I talked about with the supports, consistency in this game is definitely questionable. I had a run once where Lance and Alan both had 80% to kill this guy. Both missed, and the run was just like kind of over at that point. So definitely be careful with that. Obviously, there's not much you can do other than just take the percentages. Yeah, and it looks like the support does give us enough damage here. Now, as I said, this can be done without the support building, and you know, in general, I'm not a big fan of support building, but especially this turn 2 recruit is very consistent if you do build those supports. So, and like I said, Roy can talk. We recruit Zealot here. Zealot. So I guess I'll talk about the new units here. We're going to be getting Zealot. It's Jarrett in this translation patch, but either way. So Jarrett is very, very similar to Marcus. He's, I think, slightly better, but they're very similar units, so he's really nice in this chapter, and will be decent in the upcoming chapters. Not that he's super necessary, because they're fairly easy, but definitely a nice addition to the team. Good HP and pretty good stats at this point. Trek, who we're about to recruit, is quite bad, unfortunately. His bases for a level 4 cav actually aren't that bad. 8 defense and 25 health is pretty nice. And he is bulkier than Lance and Alan, which is kind of sweet, but unfortunately, as much as I like Lowen for level 6, and Trek is very similar to Lowen, part of what makes Lowen so good is that your stats don't need to be that high to have decent offense in that game, whereas in this game your stats really do. So Trek can be a fine unit, but I probably would not recommend training him, whereas Zealot can actually be quite nice. So we're going to recruit Trek. And then the last part of this sort of strategy, I'll say, because Roy's obviously extremely out of position here. You can build Marcus supports. We have C, and you can potentially move up Marcus, but the easiest thing to do here is just to rescue with Trek and get them both out of there. And that is how you do the turn 2 recruit. If you can do that properly, that's, again, the most consistent way to start this chapter and to recruit Trek. Alright, so I've skipped ahead just a little bit, but I want to highlight 2 things on this turn in particular. The first one is just how tough these Wyverns are. So as we can see with Marcus can not only not double the Wyvern, but also only deals 11 damage, which is really just not that much. Also, the Wyvern has a ton of range. And although he's using the Javelin right now, if he switches to the Steel Lance, he's going to have 22 attack with it, which is enough to kill a lot of our weaker units. Enough to kill... Actually, Sue will survive. It's kind of surprising. But it'll kill a lot of our weaker units, so be extra careful with that. The other thing is we're about to get the 3rd new character in this chapter, and that's Noah. So, after I rescued Roy with Trek, I dropped him with Sue over here. So just be aware that Noah is going to be appearing here on the next turn, and that you want to get that recruit as early as possible. Now, Noah is definitely stronger than Trek. His growths are not particularly good, but his bases are actually really strong. 27 health is quite good. 9 speed's decent for this point. He'll actually take hits quite well and not get doubled for a long time. Now, his offensive capability is going to sort of fluctuate, but he's actually quite a nice unit, and I would recommend... I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend using him because there are a lot of good units, especially during this phase of the game, but he can be a really nice unit just because of his decent bases. Okay, so the next sort of stage of this chapter, I would say, is on the left side, we're pretty good. We have Rutger, we have Lou, we have some characters helping out. On the right side, we also have some strong units with Zealot and Marcus, and like I said before, but this Wyvern's quite tough. So the biggest thing that we want to do is start building a wall, as we're doing. Obviously, killing units is really important, and finding an opportunity to kill the Wyvern. Now, this is, again, a pretty difficult task, and this is why the archers can be nice. Trying to find your opportunity to kill the Wyvern can be pretty tough. This is why having a plan to deal with the Wyvern can be really important, but obviously, you know, you don't always know what's going to happen with the Wyvern, and if your units just aren't strong enough to really deal with it, then you're not going to be able to make much of a plan. One of the things that you can do to get decent chip damage is to just equip everyone with a Javelin up here. And again, this is why the Lance Allen support is really important, because you don't have to put them on thickets, and they are pretty safe in this position. Obviously, chipping enemies, as I said, isn't the best thing in the world because of the clerics in the back with Physic, but also chipping enemies can be nice because that forces the clerics to potentially not kill the Wyvern. So yeah, this sort of a formation is really useful. Obviously, if you don't have the support with Lance and Allen, it can be a bit more dangerous. Maybe you want to put them over here, and then like Marcus or Zealot here, somebody can be here. Make sure that you're on the thickets. This is also kind of annoying because we've been pretty frail on this side as far as, you know, these type of units are concerned. They're not too strong if they're only attacking one enemy, but obviously the Wyvern is now in range. So we have to be pretty careful about having too many healers or our weak archers over here sort of boxing out these units. But we might be able to potentially lure the Wyvern this direction because he might want to kill Trek. So I think what we're going to do is put Trek down here in range, as long as... It would be nice if we could deal with the Knight, but it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get Dorothy out of here, but just a little bit, because again, it can be useful with the... This is where Lou can also come in handy. Lou is an amazing unit, and at this stage, really, really nice, because other than the Armor Slayer, these Knights are really annoying to deal with, and Lou can deal with them really well. So I'm going to finish up the rest of this turn, and then we'll talk about the next turn. Alright, so I've skipped ahead just a few turns. At this stage, we have cleared up most of the enemies using our blockers in the front with Lance and Allen and Marcus and Zealot, as I've been saying. Unfortunately, I still have not found an opportunity to kill the Wyverns. Actually, both Wyverns wound up coming on the right side, which is kind of surprising. One Wyvern usually winds up going on the left side, but I think because I was pushed up farther than I usually am, they both went right side, which is actually kind of nice in a strategy that I might use a bit more in the future. Because on the left side, Lou is usually here, so it's actually not too bad, but it can actually be pretty annoying with just like Rutger having to fight a Wyvern. So yeah, as you can see how effective this strategy is. Like I said, we're pretty much just down to the Wyverns, and we're going to be able to kill this one pretty easily. This is also, I think, a good opportunity to highlight just how good the archers are. We saw how much Marcus was dealing with a Silver Lance. I mean, Sue's able to deal that same amount with her Iron Bow. And Dorothy, she'll get doubled, but on ones with the Steel Lance equipped, this can actually be a ton of damage. So she can actually be amazing at helping you chip these wyverns. So in this situation, they're not the most important thing in the world because we've actually handled the front pretty well. As you can see, Lance and Alan actually handle this wyvern pretty well with their support. But I just wanted to make mention of why I did bring those archers. Now, this is with Lance and Alan support and all this great stuff. If you want to see a playthrough of this chapter where I have much weaker units and don't do the turn to recruit of Zealot and Shrek, in fact, don't recruit them at all, I did just upload a low tier run where I handled this chapter a lot differently. So there are, I would say, easier solutions to this chapter, especially if you have weaker teams, by turtling. It's usually a good strategy for any chapter, honestly. But if you want to recruit Zealot and Trek, the easiest way to do it is with that turn tier recruit. Okay, so we've been able to deal with the Wyverns. So at this point, there's just a few things that we need to still deal with that's on the map currently, and then some reinforcements. So this Wyvern does not move. It's important to remember that. He also has a red gem. Another reason to bring Chad. Money is very useful in this game, but just remember he's here because that's a big chunk of damage that somebody can be taking that you're not aware of if you don't remember. Obviously, the physic users, we got a couple more units, some units that are over here, and we're obviously going to want to be getting these houses. Now, the next thing that we're going to have to contend with are batches of 4 cavaliers that are going to be coming from the south. I believe there's 3 batches of these. Now, when they arrive, I'll highlight them, but there is one that's pretty difficult. There's one that's higher level than the other ones, and it's a Silver Lance. But as a whole, you can kind of stand on these thickets, handle them pretty well. Also, when you move past this line, whether you go through this door or you go through over here, once you enter this area, a bunch of units will spawn next to the boss and start coming at you. I would recommend waiting out the reinforcements from the south before you do this, because you really don't want to stretch yourself too thin. Now, as I said, the hardest part about this chapter is over, but don't get too careless. This is actually the part where I would say I lose more units just because you kind of you take a breath and you stop paying attention, which is fine, you should. The hardest part is over. But just make sure you're not getting too lax with your character positions and stuff, because you can still find yourself in some trouble in the latter part of this chapter. Alright, so this is the next stage of it, the reinforcements that I mentioned. So 4 cavs down here. Now most of these cavs are just pretty generic, but I do want to highlight this guy. He does have a bit better stats than the other cavs, level 15. And he has a Silver Lance, which it's really hard. So definitely be careful about this guy. But yeah, there's going to be 3 batches of these. Now the first one actually comes on enemy phase or player phase. They're not ambush spawns, which is kind of weird. I don't know why, but the next 2 batches will be ambush spawns. So just be aware of that. I also want to mention that you can get a Horse Slayer from this house up here. And obviously I'm not going to send him out here like this, but you can see just how effective the Horse Slayer is. So it can be really useful here. I also haven't mentioned shopping at all in this playthrough. And I want to mention it because shopping in the game is actually pretty important. So I actually forgot to steal the red gem from the Wyvern, but you get one from a house. So we're going to sell that, and then I don't think elixirs are the most useful. And we want fire for loot. My recommendation in this game would be to overbuy. There are a lot of enemies to kill, and you'll almost never run out of stuff. Some of the weapons maybe, but especially when it comes to fire and healing and stuff, you'll basically never run out, and it's just infinite. Alright, I just want to clarify something here, because during the shopping section, I mentioned that I recommend overbuying, which I stand by, but that the reason is because you never run out of stuff, which doesn't really make sense. It makes sense in my head, but it doesn't really make sense in the context of this, because why would you overbuy if you're never running out of stuff? My point is that, if you buy 20 fires here, you won't run out of fires to use, in the sense that you will, you'll always need more fires. So buying 20 fires here, trust me, you'll have to buy more later. So I hope that makes sense. It made sense in my mind, but then rewatching it, it seemed like I was saying that you don't run out of stuff, so why would you overbuy if you don't run out of stuff? But yeah, overbuying I think is great in this game, because you will use all those 20 fires you buy, or whatever, 20 iron swords most of the time, depending on if characters that use specific weapons. Now there is a huge money sink in this game that I'm going to be touching on much later. So if you can save some of your money, I would recommend it. And we're going to be getting the silver card on Arcadia, which is, I believe, chapter 14, something like that. So ideally, waiting to spend big money until you get to that point is kind of nice. But obviously, buy what you need. Buying is a pretty important part of these games, because there is no convoy, or no shop in the convoy. So just be aware of that. Okay, so I've waited out the 3 batches of calves that come from the south, so now we have the reinforcements from the north. We have really just a lot of 2 range, and I think the one guy doesn't have 2 range, but a lot of mages and archers and stuff. So like I said, this is one of the reasons that I think it's safer to wait. Now, obviously, the way that I'm handling this chapter is in, I think, sort of the safest way possible. So certainly you don't have to handle it exactly the same way, but it is, I think, safe to kill the calves first. Now, the strategy for killing these guys is, I guess, pretty simple. Obviously, you can open this door. I like to open this door, but it doesn't really matter. One of the things that you can do is put some kind of 2-range guy just sort of on the wall, because obviously you don't want Lou, like, fighting a million enemies. He's extremely frail. You can also put potentially somebody, like, here, for example, and he'll be able to fight the enemy. But there's not too much to say about these units. Just deal with them how you would deal with any units, I guess. Alright, so we're nearing the end of the chapter at this point. There's just a few things that I want to mention in regards to the boss, and just a few more things about the chapter. I didn't mention it was in the chests over here, but there is a second rapier for Roy and a barrier staff. Not the most useful stuff in the world. Barrier is nice, but the second rapier for Roy is kind of useless, given how bad Roy is. So again, that just means, like, maybe you don't have to bring Chad. But as far as the boss is concerned, this boss is actually, like, pretty tough just because... Not tough, but he can deal a lot of damage just because of how strong the spear is. Now, normally, Lou can actually do quite a good job. And if you look at his offensive stats, you know, he looks really good. The problem is our Lou, I think, is a bit HP screwed, even though 6 defense is pretty good. So he actually can take a hit. Can't take a hit, but normally at this point he can. So we're not going to be using him. Instead, I'm going to be using Lance, which, even with support from Alan, actually doesn't look very good with the Armor Slayer. But this Armor Slayer is about to run out, so I think we're going to use him. I'm going to mention this as well because we just got our first promotion items. I believe we got a Hero's Crest and maybe a nice crest in this chapter. I think we're going to be getting a Guiding Ring and a Whip on the next chapter. So you're going to be getting pretty close to promoting some units. As far as like promotion levels are concerned, I think you should probably promote early in these games. I don't, just because, I don't know, I like to see units grow. But I think as a rule of thumb, it's usually... you know, decent to promote early, otherwise you can't wait. This is a game where there's a lot of room to train units. Nice job, Lance. And what I mean by that is, like, whenever you promote, there's a good chance that they're going to be capping by the end of the game. Because there's just so many enemies over the course of this game, so much experience to be gained. So I wouldn't worry too much about early promoting in this game. As far as who you should be promoting, the first Hero's Crest, I mentioned how good Rucker is, and I stand by that. I think we're actually going to risk Blue here a little bit. Never do this, but whatever. Okay, we got away with it. Don't do that. I would not recommend doing that, but whatever, it's fun. Anyways, so Rucker, I think, is 100% the first Hero's Crest user I would recommend on the next handful of chapters, trying to get him experience. When we get to the Western Isles, and I'll mention that it'll be in a couple of chapters, Rucker can go crazy. So just be aware of that. As far as the Nice Crest is concerned, highly recommend one of them going to Lance or Alan. Now, I tend to prefer Lance getting the first one. As I've said before, I would recommend training both units. I just like Lance because he gets to doubling really fast, and as you can see by how fast our Lance is, he'll double really consistently, and his lack of strength and like defense and stuff won't matter that much. But Alan in the end will probably be a stronger unit. It's not super important, honestly. Just train one of them. I think Lance is easier to use early on because of his speed. So that's why I like Lance, but train whoever you want. And yeah, that's the end of the chapter. I guess there's an arena here, but don't worry about that. So, like I said, this is, you know, kind of a different editing style technique as the previous iterations of this playthrough. We're going to be sticking with this at least in the foreseeable future. So if you like this better than the other ones, or you like the last editing style better or the first one, please let me know. I'm open to suggestions. I'm just kind of playing around as I go. But yeah, let's seize with Roy, and that is the end of Chapter 7. Pat yourself on the back, because like I said, I think Chapter 7 is really difficult, especially if you did the Turn 2 recruit and got everybody necessary. So yeah, as always, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.